All right, let's take a look at section 4. Here's the focus question. The creation of the United States required creating Americans, that is, people who consider themselves members of the new nation, not simply of individual states, but who qualified as an American citizen. The word citizen appears several times in the Constitution, but no definition is given. Despite the enormous prestige that the idea of citizenship acquired in the first half of the 19th century, there was no commonly agreed upon understanding of the rights that went with it or the role of the federal government in defining and guaranteeing those rights. Whites, male and female, born in the United States were commonly assumed to be citizens, but white women lacked basic rights enjoyed by men. Enslaved people were not American citizens, nor were Indians, but the status of free black Americans born in the United States remained highly controversial. Nowhere did they enjoy full equality before the law. Not until the Reconstruction era, following the Civil War, was a clear statement added to the Constitution that affirmed the principle of birthright citizenship, that anyone born in the United States, no matter his or her race, language, religion, national origin, or legal situation of one's parents, is an American citizen and entitled to the equal protection of the laws. Colonial Americans had been divided by ethnicity, religion, class, and status, and united only by their allegiance to Great Britain. The Revolution created a new collective body, the American people, whose members were to enjoy freedom as members of a new political community. Since government in the United States rested on the will of the people, establishing the identity of the people was important. The Constitution began with "we the people," but people did not include all those living within the United States. The Constitution identified three groups in the United States: Indians, who were treated as members of independent tribes and not part of the American nation; other persons, quote unquote, or enslaved people; and the people, the only group entitled to freedom in America. America at first seemed to offer a civic identity to all who dedicated themselves to America's political principles. However, only certain groups of people were deemed citizens in the new nation. The way the early republic related to Indians and African Americans shows the contradictory principles shaping the American national identity. American leaders agreed that Western Indian land should go to white Americans, but disagreed about which option was best for dealing with the Indian population: removal, disappearance, or assimilation into white civilization. Military conflict in the Old Northwest continued until 1794, when a U.S. victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers led to the Treaty of Greenville the next year. This treaty gave most of Ohio and Indiana to the U.S. government and established an annuity system whereby tribes received annual grants of money at the cost of government interference in tribal affairs. Not all Americans believed that Indians were innately inferior to white Americans. Some, like Thomas Jefferson, believed they lived at a less advanced stage of civilization. In the 1790s, the federal government distributed agricultural tools and livestock to Indians to encourage them to adopt American ways of life. Native nations remained in control of lands west of the Mississippi River. They formed political and trade alliances with neighboring European powers. The Osages and Quapaw sold hides to French traders in exchange for weapons. When France ceded Louisiana to Spain, the Osage and Quapaw formed alliances with Spain to obtain guns to defend their lands. On the Great Plains, the Comanche consolidated power through horse ownership and pushed the Apache into Spanish New Mexico, where they attacked the Pueblo and Spanish communities surrounding Santa Fe. The status of free blacks in the early republic was ambiguous. The Constitution did not initially define who were citizens of the United States, so individual states defined the boundaries of freedom. In some states, North and South, free blacks had some rights, including the right to vote. But the vast majority of blacks were enslaved, and enslaved people were not considered members of the nation or fully eligible for citizenship if free. Early immigration policy shows that Americans excluded blacks from their conception of who was an American. The Naturalization Act, passed by Congress in 1790, first defined American nationality by allowing only free white persons to emigrate and become citizens. Although some believe that this law initiated an open immigration policy, the word white in the law excluded the majority of mankind from coming to America and becoming citizens. John Locke had argued that liberty flowed from a man having the power of reason, and it did not seem a contradiction at this time to deny liberty to irrational beings. Increasingly, white Americans saw blacks as lacking the qualities that enabled freedom, qualities like self-control, reason, and allegiance to the larger community. Thomas Jefferson, in his Notes on the State of Virginia, published in 1785, claimed that blacks, because of their nature and experience of slavery, were disloyal to America, and he speculated that blacks were inherently inferior to whites. While he believed that Indians might have the capacity to become as civilized as whites, he did not believe blacks naturally had this capacity. While hoping for the end of slavery and opposing the slave trade, he also supported colonization, or the idea that blacks, once freed from slavery, could never be part of America and should be colonized in Africa or other parts of the Western Hemisphere. In his ambivalent approach to race and slavery, Jefferson reflected the thinking of his generation. While the decline of apprenticeship and indentured servitude expanded freedom for whites, the Revolution widened the divide between free Americans and enslaved Americans. Race now became a convenient justification for slavery in a nation dedicated to liberty. We the people increasingly meant only white Americans. So that's the end of our last section. We'll go to chapter 8 next.